natives in the states of Alabama, Georgia, they were removed from that area into Oklahoma. That's one reason they call it the Oklahoma Native Land or Indian Territory back in the 1800s. But they were removed from their homeland to another land, which is Oklahoma, and that's where they settled, the Choctaws, Chickasaws, and other tribes.
Hesje Istongo, Karen McGirt, Judge Ifgados, Charlene McGirt, Mummin Quinn Gambler, Judge Gados, Karen Musgrove, Mummin Jory McGirt, Jabasal Gados, Ejoel Gidovis, Amajolgit, Ballin, Evilguggan, Oslidos, Eufaula, Omahaga, Jugodos, Middle Creek Number 1, Miko Savga, Jugo, Aidos, Bagantalasi and Jugo, Flockados. So in the 1700s and 1800s, Andrew Jackson signed the Removal Act, and so the 5 civilized tribes were removed from their homelands. So the Creeks from Alabama, Seminoles from Florida, and the Cherokees, Chickasaws, and Choctaws all from that area too were moved to Oklahoma. One of the stories that I heard is that whenever we were walking on the Trail of Tears, those thousands of miles, the little people were walking with us too, and they were carrying their own fires to their ceremonial grounds and everything like that. I think that it was horrible, and if I'm being honest, sometimes it makes me very racist towards white people to this day. Some of them, I know not all of them, but they still treat us as if we're like foreigners, as if we're not supposed to be here, as if this is their land, but we're the first people here.
The removal was brought on by Andrew Jackson, who wanted the lands for white settlers. And so, with all the tribal towns and all the Indian people living in that area, he had to remove them some kind of way. And so they were little bit by little bit, treaties were made, and then they were just stripping of the land from the Indian people. And then you had a lot of the colonists, the non-Indians, were coming in and more or less terrorizing the Indian families down there in Alabama and Georgia. And we resisted. The Creek people resisted, and we had a faction called the Red Stick Warriors. And my tribal town is Eufaula, and we're a red town. There's Hilebi, Okfuskee. Those are a few of the red towns that existed in Alabama at the time. And then there you hear the Battle of Horseshoe Bend, which we were defeated at, and then after that happened, that it was determined that we were going to be removed to Indian Territory. And on top of that, one of the chiefs from Coweta, William McIntosh, signed a treaty of removal, which was against people's wishes and against tribal custom, because it's been stated that no lands will be sold, can be sold, because one person doesn't own all the land. And so he went against tribal custom and tradition, and he was chased out of his home in I believe it was Georgia, and they set his house on fire, and when he ran out of his cabin, they shot him as he was running out, and they shot him. So after that happened, all the families were removed by soldiers coming into the villages and the countryside and saying that you no longer live here, just get your things and you're scheduled to get on a boat and take you to Indian Territory, or you're going to walk. When these women heard that the tribe was moving to another land, that they picked their potteries up, that the ones they made by hand, they just busted on the ground in disgust of the having to be removed. It's like you're sitting in your own house watching TV and somebody says, you no longer live here, get out. It's just, that's the feeling it got, and of course a lot of elders were there, a lot of children were involved. The 5 tribes were removed, and from various spots of the southeast. Another one is some of the mothers had to kill their babies because they would cry, and they didn't want to be detected by the soldiers. So they would kill their babies because they were constantly crying. And then, of course, that was 1832 to 1835. That was probably the strongest. Then the Seminoles were the last one to be dealt with because they were more in Florida, in southern Alabama and Georgia. There, some of the Seminoles were Creek people anyway. We speak the same language, and a lot of them went, instead of going this way, they went towards the Florida Everglades.
Then.
When they first established the boarding school back in the late 1800s, their goal was to educate Native Americans as to enter the white generation, so to speak. And the reason they wanted to educate the Native Americans so they can produce more of themselves, whether it was family matters, growing, building homes, things like that. That is to teach them. And then they can carry that tradition on to their children and grandchildren, just teach them. The boarding schools back then were somewhat like a missionary school, you know. And again, it goes back to education, to change their way of life, to enter the white man's world, so to speak. And a lot of Native Americans didn't want to leave their traditions or their homelands because they were comfortable. They were making their own way of life, whether it's hunting on their land or growing crops, things like that, but they didn't want to leave. So they wasn't allowed to speak their native tongues because, again, it goes back to teaching the natives the English word. And that's how, back then, not only the whites, but they wanted to teach the natives the English tongue so they can communicate better. And that's the reason for that. And some of the Native Americans didn't want to do that. They wanted to stay with their own language, which is the native language. I think if they spoke their native tongue out of, as far as using the English, is that they were punished. How they were punished, I don't know, you know, back in those days. But I've heard stories that they were whipped, they were beaten, and they were, and it's sad to say, but I think some of them were made to eat soap in a matter of washing their mouth out because they wanted to teach them the English version to speak instead of their language. Because as far as communicating with each other, the whites, they didn't know what the natives were talking about. The natives didn't know what the whites were talking about as far as their language. So they wanted everybody to learn the English language.
To strip the Native Americans of their identity and kind of not make them white people, but try to make them civil and try to make them act like white people instead of the people that they truly are. So like they would cut their hair off, and you know, if they spoke their language, they would get beat. They were separated.
The Carlisle Indian School was built in 1887. And that's the only one I can think of right now that early. Of course, back in my understanding was in Alabama and Georgia, they had a few not very big orphan homes, you know, for the homes for the orphans, but it was just a few. But the major one was Carlisle Indian School in 1887. I think it was built in Pennsylvania, and it was meant to, like they said, it was to save the man and destroy the Indian.
Mm.
And with that, when they took all the kids that were in Northern Plains and Oklahoma and just about anywhere, I think, they were shipped to the Carlisle Indian School. Yeah, you see the photos of those kids in that photos, you know, they're all in their uniforms. It's just like this school here. The old school, Eufaula boarding school for girls was, of course, it was over here on in a different location, but they all had uniforms too. I've seen them even up into actually third grade. They used to, in my day at the public school, they all wore uniforms. They're all the same haircuts, you know, straight across. I was told back in the days that when they wanted to change an Indian person, that they would wash their mouth out with soap because they were speaking the language, and speaking your language was a no, you don't do that. And of course, you hear about beatings, even killings probably. Some of these boarding schools have cemeteries to them, and of course you have Chilocco. They have a cemetery there, I think.
My grandpa went to that school, Chilocco.
Chilocco, yeah. Just a lot of them went from here too, went up there, and then Chilocco and then Haskell. They were the older schools around, I think, at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And then of course you had Jones and Eufaula too, but Eufaula, I think that was established in 1885, maybe, I'm not sure, but in that range. My grandmother was a student there.
Mm.
On top of that, she was sent to a boarding school herself, and all these Indian schools were filled up, and they sent her out to Arizona. They sent her to Phoenix Indian School, way over there.
That's crazy.
She didn't know anybody, and they were different tribes, different languages. She said she had to defend herself quite often with, she used to fight the Pima girls. And she said, there was about 2 other girls there from Oklahoma. But other than that, they were all from out in Arizona. But that's a different story because it was just, actually that was a way of getting her land, because she was a orphan herself, and she had a sister, but it was just getting her out of the way, because she was a minor, and they could do whatever they want to do with her property.
Yeah.
And then, but speaking of the trauma of the Trail of Tears, I was told by some people that that's why you have diabetes a lot today.
Mm.
It's carried over in your genes. The trauma, diabetes and heart conditions and just a lot of ailments, the headaches have been, linked to the of that period because of its traumatic, especially to the mothers. So.
My viewpoint on boarding schools now, it's a great place to be. One, you have given the opportunity to educate yourself, to be educated. As far as the history, when it first began, again, a lot of people or natives didn't want to change their traditional ways. They wanted it kept the same because they were used to that. But today's society, You know, you have to receive an education, because without an education, it's almost impossible to survive, you know. And the way that I see boarding schools now, it's a great place to be. You're given room and board, you're fed 3 times a day, things of that nature. So you have to go with the flow, so to speak. But your main priority is education. At first I went to Carlisle Seminary, which is in Ardmore, Oklahoma. And the boarding school itself was great. Didn't have no problem there. But what I had to deal with as far as the public school was considered that some, and not all of them, but some of them seemed like they couldn't relate to the Native Americans back then. And what I mean by that, they didn't get along. You know, I don't know if race fell into that factor, or the way you were treated, or the way you were spoken to. But, and it wasn't only I. You know, a lot of students that went to Carlisle Seminary public schools, they felt this way, you know. So they either gave up, went back home, and went back to school there at home, or they went to another boarding school. In my case, I went back home, and the following year I came here to Eufaula boarding school, and that's where I remained. And back then, the staff, they were great. They were good to the kids. They treated them respectfully. They were taught more than what they knew as far as education, manners, but they grew. And the more they grew, the more advanced they became in education. But no, the boarding school that I went to here, it was great. The people were great. The food was great. And there's not one thing I can say bad about Eufaula boarding school back in the 70s. That was wrong. I mean, it was great. If I had to do it all over again, I'd do it. When I first entered this school system, I knew it was home to me. And to this day, I consider it my home, because like many other students that attended Eufaula boarding school, that's what it was. We treated each other as family because we lived together, we ate together, we played together, went to school together. And back then, we treated each other as family, and we respected each other. And the staff, they respected us, and that's when I had the opportunity to work here in '75 under Dr. Taylor's supervision. And very few people knew this, that I was actually working and attending high school here. It was under Dr. Taylor. But that's where I learned the policies, procedures, and the rules and regulations of a boarding school was under her. 30 plus years I've been here. And, you know, I've always told people when they come here, you know, you're here for the kids, you're not here for money. Mm-hmm. But the number one goal is for the kids. You're here for the kids, nothing else. If you're here for the money, then you're in the wrong place to work, because these kids are the future of any tribe. And we have a lot of different kids here that's different tribes. We have Cherokee, Choctaw, Chickasaw, Creek. Back in the 80s, we had Blackfeet, Apache, Seminoles, all the tribes that I could think of, we had them all here. So it was great.
To me, in my opinion, boarding schools' purposes now are to give a safe place for Native American kids who either don't have a good home life, or their parents are struggling, or they just need to be separated. It's a home for them. It's a place for them to have friends and to go and do things like go to the movies and stuff like that, and have a normal life separate from maybe what they're facing at home.
Mm-hmm.
as far as reservations are concerned, they were put in reservations to keep certain tribes together, you know. But far as that is concerned, that's basically what it was for, a reservation.
To keep us in one area where they also have control over us. They're very poor living conditions. I know some Dene reservations don't even have clean water, and they still use wells. They don't have, you know, like toilets or nothing like that. They have outhouses still, and it's like they're living in the 1800s out there. And I know that like there will be liquor stores and everything on the reservations, but there won't be a school.
Well, as far as alcohol is concerned, not only Native Americans going to consume, and not all of them going to consume alcohol, you know. There's other races that consume alcohol, so as far as the natives, they shouldn't be pinpointed as the ones who do all the consumption of alcohol or drugs, because it's in every society that we live on. It's in every state and every country. So as far as alcohol, it's everywhere. You know, as far as the natives being, and the natives has always been pinpointed as the one who can't control their liquor or drinking, has a drinking problem. It's everywhere. But as far as suicide, you know, I see the rate of suicide going up, and I go by generations, what I see, and it's gone up, and it's sad to say that a lot of the kids, or even parents for that matter, they're not educated in these type of issues, but they need to be educated, because that way they can help prevent whether it's suicide, alcoholics, drug abuse, and alcohol is a drug abuse. But we need to do more for our Native Americans than just sit idle. We need to educate them. And that's one reason why the boarding schools were established, is to educate Native Americans. So yeah, we need to have more funding as far as education is concerned. It's always going to be trauma when you have a person that's addicted to drugs. And what I've seen around is that drug abuse is climbing, and it's everybody. It's just not one certain race. It's everybody that's getting addicted to, say, cocaine or meth. It's a drug that's uncontrollable. And my understanding is once a person takes meth, cocaine, it's almost impossible to get off of it because it's so addictive. And again, it goes back to saying no to drugs.
Yes, I would say majority of it would be either alcoholism or sexual assault, but there's also a lot of domestic abuse and drug abuse in there. I know in New Mexico they have to have police around there all the time because, you know, husbands are beating their wives, but then the police don't listen to them, and then they'll just throw it away because they're on a reservation.
Tradition's always going to help in a native world. Tradition started back way in our ancestors. You know, they started up the traditions, and it's always helped the Native Americans, whether one believes it or not. You know, the ones who believes it will continue their traditions, and the ones who may not believe in the tradition, they have a choice whether to believe or not to believe. But as far as tradition, it's always going to be there. It's always going to be a way of life for the Native Americans. Songs and prayers, again, has always been the way of Native Americans. It's a tradition that we can fall back to. And a tradition is actually remembering our Father, which is God, you know. We can sing praises to our Father. We can pray to our Father, and He's the creator of heaven and earth. So we have that tradition we can always fall back on to strengthen ourselves, to seek help. The songs and prayers depending on what that person is looking for. You know, for instance, they may, let me throw this at you. Say, for instance, there's a death in a family. The songs may be sung pertaining to that person that's deceased, but yet it's still giving God the glory. And prayers is to help the families to deal with the situation. So prayer and song is a vital substance to the Native Americans as far as speaking to the Creator.
Because like through ceremonies and everything, a lot of the time you have to be sober. And it's also like social gatherings, so people want to go, so they'll stay sober for the 4 days and everything like that. And it's just kind of giving kids another opportunity to do something besides go to a party. You can just go to a dance.
Yeah.
I feel like it's with connecting with our ancestors. You know, they sung those on the Trail of Tears when they were coming over. That's where those songs came from. I feel like it's just a piece of them that whenever we do it, we're speaking to them and that they're there with us singing. I would say a lot of it came from pain, and then there's some like someone got sick and they passed away, so there's songs that are saying like, whenever I see you on the other side, you know, it'll all be worth it and everything. And there's songs that talk about how, you know, we're all here celebrating right now. There's sadness going on, but we're alive and we're all together. I feel like it's just kind of, the songs are for them to say what they want to say to the other side.
So
Yes and no. You know, you see some things that you may have experienced back in, say, the early or middle 1900s, but how you deal with it is what counts. You know, you deal with it and move on. You know, you don't let it get you down.
I think history is repeating itself, because just like the Dakota Access Pipeline, if they go through with that and it breaks the Keystone pipeline, then, you know, they're going to have to move. They're going to be essentially not on a Trail of Tears, but essentially that they're going to have to go. They're going to have to leave their area. And that's poor conditions anyways out there on that Standing Rock Reservation. And so they're going to go into something even worse.
You know, trauma's always going to be everywhere. You know, it don't matter where it's at, it's going to be there. We're getting at the point where I believe that Christ is getting ready to come back. So, you know, at the end times, we're going to see problems come up. You know, that's biblical. You know, we're going to see things we've never seen before. So I believe that as far as what the Bible says and the signs to look for, yeah, I think it's just going to get worse as far as society itself is concerned.
Yes. I think that it hasn't been stopped. I mean, because I know that just the trauma that I have passed down from me from even like my mother, I'm going to pass down to my kids just because that's what I know, that's what I feel, that's what, you know, I've been through.
I would say seek your family, because your family may have ideas of how to cope with trauma, whether it's alcohol abuse, drug abuse, sexual abuse, whatever the case may be. But always seek help, whether it's in the family or even outside the family. Speak to your counselors, your public school counselors, and they can help you. They can point you in the right direction on who to see, and they'll help you.
Don't tell anybody that you're less than what you are, because everyone is equal. Even though you're not treated equal, you are. Don't let racism affect you, because you know that, your ancestors and everything have gone through this, and so you're strong enough. You got this and everything.
Well, do you know what boarding schools are, what their purposes are for now, like modern day today?
Well, I'll tell you what, we attended this. I graduated from Sequoia Indian School myself, and then I went out to Santa Fe, New Mexico at the Art Institute in '71, which used to be the Santa Fe Indian School. But I'm thinking that probably give a better chance for the students to develop themselves, more academically, and because a lot of kids live in urban areas that, and probably school systems that don't really pay attention to them, and so it gives them that edge to get a better education and to a better, I assume, be better behaved, behavioral, just keep an eye on their behavior. I guess, I don't know, but that's what I've gathered. But going to Sequoia was a good school for me, and it was only went there because they had Indian art class or art class. Here.
Yeah.
They didn't have it here in Eufaula, and I was an artist, so that helped me to learn a little bit more about the art.
I mean, that's cool. I had some family that went up to Sequoia too. I think my mom went up there, but oh no, it was my aunt. But I think because my mom and my grandma and them, they didn't really have a good relationship, so I guess that's why they sent them up there. But yeah, she didn't, I don't know why she didn't like it. I think she was more into like partying around, not really worried about school or anything.
Yeah,
so.
that's it right there. That's a lot of times a lot of friends of mine at school were from broken homes, or they were court ordered to go to these places. I never asked no questions while I was there,
Yeah.
none of my business, but some of the people were older than what they are, they're like 22 years old in high school, so.
Yeah.
But, to me, I think it gave some of the students advantages, a better advantage to fit into society, I guess, a lot of times, because a lot of these kids didn't have it. And a lot of kids didn't have anybody. They were foster kids, and I think that's probably the best thing that could happen for them. I think if they stayed with the school system and try to do what they say. And plus, they have other things, you got sports, and then you have your academic recognitions and your skills. They used to have a lot of livestock and carpentry class and things like that, but they took that away from at Sequoia. They no longer have that. It would have been good if they kept those, because not everybody's really into paper and homework. I think they're more skilled at doing outdoor work.
Yeah, that's true. Okay, we're just gonna move on to reservations. Do you know like the purpose of reservations were?
It's to keep the, in my mind, it was to keep the Indian people away from American society. To keep them pinned up. And if you leave the reservation, you get shot. But that ideal came back a long time ago now. This is not a new thing. Again, Jackson, President of the United States, Abraham Lincoln, he ordered some people to be hung up there in North Dakota or Minnesota.
Wasn't there like 56 men or something
I think
like
so,
that?
yeah. And reservations were just to try to do away with this, actually. To do away with the Indian people. And take your land. But a lot of things go along with that. Is like they put us in an Indian territory, all the different tribes here, all the way from the Modocs from Oregon, Cayugas, Senecas, they're all here. They don't live here. They're not really from here. They got land base now. But the Osages and some of the Creek Seminoles, when they moved us here, this is nice land. I mean, you know, it's not homeland. It's real beautiful from Alabama, but here, you know, you can grow crops and everything like that. But oil was found. Gas and oil was found on these Osage Reservation and the Seminole Creek allotments. And so there's no reservations in Oklahoma. There's a lot of land. But gas and oil was found. And then money's involved here now. And then when money's involved and this commodity's coming out of the ground, this gold, oil, lives were in danger of being murdered. The Osages were part of that product of getting wiped out because of the headrights. White men were marrying Osage women and vice versa. White people were married into the tribe just to get the headrights of the lands, oil and gas, whatever. Glenpool, Cushing, Seminole, there used to be a lot of oil derricks in all these lands, you know, it looks like where they drill oil, and that's was worth a lot of money. XE5 from Eufaula, she was the richest lady in the world, or the Creek lady in the world, and because her land was on oil land, gas land. And mysteriously, she lost that after she died. Her property was just, don't know what happened to it. I guess some lawyer got a hold of it, I guess. I don't know.
What kind of living conditions were they?
Reservations?
Mm-hmm.
Well, not very good. First of all, they put you on land that they thought wasn't going to be productive at all, which is a lot of it wasn't. South Dakota, friends tell me that, you know, there's just wind and wheat and grass up there. You know, there's not a lot to it. A lot of alcoholism going on.
Mm-hmm.
Now, prostitution in some places, and drug activity. It's a hard place to live in this present day. I can only speak for this present day because, you know, I just, you know, you're reading a book about the reservation life, and it's wasn't very good at all.
Yeah.
They thought that the Creek people were given a lot of land with a cow and a pig, you know, and there you are, there's your reward, or there's your gift, you know, do something with it, you know, and those were stolen from them too.
I heard that there's like a lot, like they won't even like build schools on reservations, that they'll just put liquor stores instead of schools on reservations. I don't know, I think one of my friends.
Well, yeah, the liquor stores were not supposed to be on tribal lands, but they would be right across the street, just across the border, you know, just across, it could be the border right there, you know, they could legally build one across the street.
Dang. So, you think there's like a lot of substance abuse and alcohol abuse that goes on?
There is now, yeah.
And a lot of sexual abuse as well.
That goes on a lot. I'm just thinking about some of the people, a friend of mine from South Dakota, you know, he lives in Tulsa now, but that's why he don't live there no more, because there's nothing there.
Yeah.
And you think the tribal chairmen would do something about it, but it doesn't happen. Not quick enough anyway.
Yeah. How do you think this can all be prevented on the reservations?
again, it goes back to the leadership or people crying out for change. I don't know, some people get killed because they talk too much. AIM has tried to come to some of these reservations when they're called upon to help them out, but they get run off. They get resisted by the local goon squad. They call them, you know, the local rednecks that will keep her from advancing to better conditions, what they're asking for, or even asking to the White House to even help. And a lot of that goes on deaf ears, or just that's promises, and empty promises, and it doesn't happen. Yeah, reservation life is what I was told is not very good at all. And I don't really know what changes are being made, because there's no, like I said, there's no reservations in Oklahoma.
Yeah. Recently, well, not recently, but I guess Dennis Banks had passed, you know, and he was the founder of, you know, AIM. Well, I was gonna try and get in touch with him, but like a week, I think, after we had made this plan, he ended up passing, and I was like so devastated. But I was really gonna, because I think, I don't know, I had like some people that are like connected to him, so I was either like, if he lived in like a different state or something, I was just gonna Skype him, like interview him through there. But you know, so I was gonna put AIM in this, but not many people know about it, you know. So like, so that's why I kind of like exit some stuff off, because most people don't really know about it.
You know, his best friend was from Eufaula, but he died about 5 years ago. His name was Lehman Brightman Jr. But he was a professor of Indian Studies at California Davis, University of California Davis, and we'd see him in a cafe. He'd always come back in July, and I don't know why, but we'd see him at the cafe and talk, and pretty radical anyway, older man he was, but he was a good friend of Dennis. In fact, when they were looking for Dennis, you know, he had him at his house, at Lehman Brightman's house in California, and he said, the FBI says, you know, you're harboring a fugitive? He said, no, he's my friend. He's not a fugitive to me. So, but you know, all that activism is, it started a lot of things, you know, but it's been going on for years, you know, trying to make the right things for the wrong conditions that people live in and have to live in. You feel bad. I feel bad for those kids that have to put up with stuff like that, alcoholism and abuse. And nobody say nothing and get killed if you say something. You know, that's what happens on the reservation.
Yeah.
Basically.
Okay, we're just gonna move on to traditions. Do you think our traditions help us on the road to recovery with throughout all the trauma?
It can. It can. If you follow up, you have to follow up. You just can't say, well, I'm going to do it one time and that's it. As an artist, that's therapy for me a lot of times. And I've been an artist since I was 5 years old. And my grandmother encouraged me to stay with the arts. And then, of course, and I did a lot of Indian kids like to draw. But I took a little step further and just started competing in these student shows, and that's how I got started when I was 17 years old. And Jerome Tiger was is my cousin. He inspired me because he did a lot of scenes of the Trail of Tears and Home Life. And I think he inspired a lot of kids at the time, you know, growing up, and a lot of art. You'll see a lot of artists' work. But traditions, it can help you. I mean, in like medicines and things that the elders tell you, you should adhere to what they're telling you, because they've been here a long time. They know. And if they say don't do this, don't do it, you know.
Yeah.
Or they'll tell you you'll find out why eventually. Why they say don't do this, don't drink, don't do drugs. And so some people don't never recover. They stay in that mode forever. It seems like their brain shrinks and gets smaller, and their reasoning gets distorted, and then they just don't want to stop drinking or doing what they do. Mm-hmm. You get into an addiction when that happens. You know, you're in a different state of mind and world. You know, nothing. You become callous to pain, that grief that you cause your kids and other people. You can get sent to jail, prison, or whatever, you know, but some people find religion in prison a lot of times too. Some people will follow the pipe, which is a northern tradition, and of course that has a lot to do with the sweat lodge, which is a purification of the body. The Creek people in eastern Oklahoma, during the summer months, they drink the medicine during the green corn, mm-hmm. and it purifies it. You throw up all the poisons in your body, you know, but you only can do it 4 times in the mm-hmm. summer. You don't do it every 4 is a limit.
Yeah.
You know, so that's a good thing. It was meant for all of us to purify our bodies and get these poisons out of our bodies. They mm-hmm. scratch you, get that old blood out, and wherever you hurt, you know, they'll scratch you that area. Mm-hmm. It empowers you. Now, this practice has been going on for centuries. Now, the problem is I don't want to talk too much about it because, like Ancestor says, you know, you don't want to reveal too much because mm-hmm. a lot of people are out here to make money off of it.
Or try to copy it in some type of way.
You know, the pharmaceuticals will get a hold of it, you know, and that's what happens a lot.
Yeah, I've been going to song dance with my mom because, well, I have 2 different tribes. Mm-hmm. Well, not 2 different, but like I got like 5 tribes on my dad's side and like just Creek on my mom's side. Mm-hmm. But I lived with my mom most of my life, so I grew up around stomp dances and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. So I've been around that stuff for a long time, but I always remembered my grandma telling me that I had to pick one because my dad was always in peyote meetings and powwows and stuff like that, and he told me that, or she told me that I can't be mixing medicines like that. Mm-hmm. So she told me to pick one, so I picked one, but I just went with my mom's side because I did more in that. I didn't really know how to dance or anything like that, but I just remember my mom or my grandma told me that. But I got scratched a couple times. Mm-hmm. Yeah, like they're really deep, especially on my legs. Mm-hmm. Like I just had knee surgery, so they some of my people out there that scratched me mm-hmm. knew that I had knee surgery, so they had put scratches on my knees, mm-hmm. and yeah, it hurt so bad. But yeah, anyway, I just kind of take it, you know. But
you know, speaking of the beliefs, that is a physical reality when you throw up and purge, you know, and throw up these things, and that's what it's meant for. And but you know, in this modern day era now that, you know, Christianity is in a lot of people's lives now, they turn towards the gospel to carry on the spiritual effects and the supernatural effects that it has, and people overcome a lot of these ailments through belief and prayer. You know, prayer goes a long ways. Mm-hmm. So,
what do the songs and slash prayers mean? Like, what do you think they mean? Are they like coming from all the trauma they've been through, or like are they coming from?
Now, which tribe you talking about now?
Maybe Creek. We'll go with Creek. Yeah.
The songs? Like
songs and some of the prayers, are they, you know?
Well, the songs, the prayers I've heard is, it's being said for individuals, can be said for a situation, and then everybody prays at the same. Sometimes they'll be told what to pray for, and they'll all pray in unison, which is a more powerful force than more than anything you can find, really. The ceremonial songs, or the stomp dance songs, you're supposed to stay awake all night long when you take the medicines, and those songs are just to keep you going, keep you awake all night long, keep you going, and in the morning you have your morning songs, when the sun rises, morning stars up. Because those songs are just really supposed to energize a person to keep moving and stay active. That medicine that you take is going to, or your body's going to react to that medicine. It's supposed to really make you think clearer, feel good, and it's good for your health.
Do you know where they origin from?
The origin?
Where they came from, all the dances and stuff?
No, I don't.
Was it just like by our ancestors that started it, or?
Well, it had to go for centuries, for many years. My understanding was the turtle shell wasn't always, the women wear turtle shells, shekels, but it used to be deer toes. It used to be deer toes or deer horns, one, but that's what they used to wear instead of the turtle shells you see now. So things have evolved over the centuries or years, of how things are being done now. They also said, the elders also warned that you don't shortcut your medicinal practices or your timing of, you have it all at the same time, like you do annually or yearly, you have it the same date and everything. They said you confuse the animals when you change things around. They don't know when to fly, they don't know when to, bury themselves or hibernate or wake up. And it's pretty important.
Yeah. Do you think history is repeating itself? Like, remember how they had that DAPO up there in North Dakota? And they wanted to put that pipeline in on that reservation, but that was like cleaning water for them to drink from and like stuff like that. And they were, either way, it was going to go in without them saying, without their saying it or not.
That goes on a lot anyway. I mean, that was just an example about people coming together there, but corporations are going to have their way a lot of times, and you have to fight them in court to stop them a lot of times. But as my understanding, it started leaking, like they said it was.
Yeah.
That's what I heard. So that's a strike against them. And I don't know what they're going to do about it. That's yet to be seen, I guess. But I don't know, history repeating itself. Yeah, well, in modern times and money talks, and who's got the more money prevails in this day and age, I think.
Yeah. Do you think trauma has yet to be stopped?
Trauma? Yeah, it needs to stop.
Yeah.
It's going to happen. People abuse and fight and abuse themselves, It's, hopefully it'll quail down some, it'll stop or slow down, but, it's up to us to take care of those matters.
Yeah.
As humans. If you're a caring human, you'll take care of your family, the members that are going through things, that's a start,
Yeah. Okay, this is the last one, but if you could give the future generation some words of advice to cope with trauma in their lives, or just advice, what would it be?
Well, see, I would just say always try to believe in yourself and try to do the right thing. Get help from probably people that's been through the same situation. Don't be proud. Ask for advice or assistance. If you got problems, seek counseling or whoever's there to help to take care of these matters, because you can't do it by yourself, and it's hard to try to do it by yourself. I tried that, it doesn't work. And I knew what I needed to happen, but I had to have other people involved. And it's also good to have other people support, maybe in a support group. People have been traumatized, you know, it's just, it's an awful thing. But there's help out there now that you can seek advice and professional help. Take advantage of those. A lot of times the Indian Health Service will take care of a lot of matters, I believe, or assist in some kind of way. And that's what they're there for.
All right. Well, I appreciate you coming out
All right.
and helping me with this interview.
Who's your folks anyway?
Okay, personal experiences or stories that I would like to share is perfectly okay. So whatever, you know, you don't have to follow all these guidelines. Well, I try to tell everybody so they don't have to, you know. But can you discuss anything about the Indian removal, like how it started, when it started, like what was the purpose of it, anything like that?
I probably don't have a lot of expertise in that area, but it didn't come from anything good. It was to get the land away from the Native Americans, and you know, some of them were removed at different times. It didn't all happen at once, but over time, they were removed from their homelands, and that includes, you know, Muskogee Creek Nation as well. So it was out of disrespect for, you know, them already being on that land and belonging to that land. So it was two different cultures, you know, people coming from the outside not understanding that, you know, that land already belonged to someone else. Just because they weren't doing what they thought needed to be done on that land didn't mean that it wasn't theirs or they didn't belong to it. So everything that has to do with it came from all negative. Bad intentions and not understanding other cultures, and, you know, people coming from the outside to try to take over. And that's basically what it means to me. I mean, I know there are a lot of facts and things surrounding it, but that's what it all boils down to.
Okay. Do you know the Dawes Act? It kind of goes with the Indian removal, kind of, you know. So like when they started their roll numbers and stuff like that, could you kind of like talk about what you know on the Dawes Act?
Well, the Dawes Act was a way that they came up with to create rolls to identify and list all of the Native Americans for each tribe.
Okay.
And of course now there are some benefits to having an ancestor, being able to trace your lineage back to the Dawes rolls. And it is very interesting. You can, you know, look up that information. It's available on the internet. You can see who's on it. You know, I was telling you that my great grandpa was 3 years old, and he's on there with his mother and, you know, her mother, and that's very interesting. But at the same time, that's not really a appropriate way to, you know, identify a people. You know, and it's just a list, and it doesn't show respect for their culture or their language or their traditions or anything like that. And then if people for whatever reason didn't get on that list, then it was like their identity was taken away from them, their culture, you know, they're not part of it anymore just because they're not on some list that was established by the government.
Oh, yeah.
So that could be a problem.
What were the purpose of boarding schools way back then?
I think that, the purpose was to get the Native American children and teach them how to be white.
Yeah.
I don't think it wasn't probably monitored very well. So as to them having proper care and proper nutrition and all of that, there was a lot of bad things that happened. Abuse. There was probably some people who had good intentions and wanted to help them, but because they didn't think that, they thought that they were uneducated or lived in poor conditions, but that wasn't their place to decide that. They were living how their culture lived, or how they were taught to live, or how they wanted to live. And certain organizations, the federal government, or sometimes it was church organizations and whatnot, felt that they needed to be, taught and educated and taken away from their homes and taken away from their culture. So that's, even though, they may have had good intentions, that's not, probably wasn't really what happened. Nothing good really came of that.
Yeah. What do you think boarding schools are meant for today?
Well, I do think that they're totally different now. They could be helpful to some children, if they might be able to have some opportunities, or they might just would rather go to that school. Some of the boarding schools have really great educational opportunities and can provide a lot of support for the students. And generally now, I don't think, people go there because they're forced to go there. They go there because they want to.
Yeah.
And I think, it's more of a dormitory situation than a boarding school. So they're not being isolated or taken away from anything. And that it's probably more of about creating opportunities and support than taking people out of their homes to turn them into something else. I don't think it's anything like that anymore.
Okay, we're just gonna move on to reservations. What was the purpose of them? Like, how were they formed?
Since we are not on a reservation, really, I don't have that much knowledge of reservations, but they were formed, first of all, in exchange. We're going to take you off of this land that we want, so we can we'll give you this land over here that we don't want. And it was a lot of bad things came from that, because then they're going somewhere they're not familiar with. They're going to be isolated and kept over here, where they don't have resources and don't have, ways to get help or improve or have the things that they need. So, my personal opinion is that they were created to remove Native Americans and push them out of the way.
Do you think like a lot of substance abuse and sexual abuse and alcohol abuse, all this abuse, happens a lot in Native Americans? Not only Native Americans, I know it happens a lot to, other ethnics, but, you always hear like Native Americans are always getting drunk, or they're always using their money to go casino, or, just all these stereotypes you hear. Like, do you think, a lot of that occurs in the Native tribes? It
does, and part of some of the stereotypes come from reservation life, but some of them are also, non-reservation, but we weren't equipped to deal with all of that stuff. We didn't have a lot of that in our traditional ways. And when those things were introduced to us, and at the same time we're being stripped of our cultural identity and losing a lot of our traditions and things like that, it did create, an environment that led to more problems. All the different problems: substance abuse, domestic violence, mental health issues, depression, child abuse, sexual abuse, all of these things. And we know that, those events, the removal that happened, even though it's a long time ago now, it affected those people deeply. And then that in turn affected the way that they took care of their children and then their children and on down the line. And that's why we're talking about historical and generational trauma today. Because we can see the impact that it had. And that's why Native Americans have a high rate of suicide and have a high rate of substance abuse and a high rate of poverty. Because we were set up for that to happen. And we didn't have, have the resources or the coping skills and that connection with our cultural identity.
Okay. Do you think our traditions help us on the road to recovery with all the trauma throughout the generations?
Yes, absolutely. Our traditions are very important. And you're talking about the road to recovery, so recovering from these issues. We can recover, and individuals need to recover, but we can also recover as a people. And part of recovery, so when you're talking about all of our people, we're talking about prevention. So an individual would need to reach the recovery state, but we want to reach those other people that haven't started having those problems yet and do some prevention with them. And so when we're talking about prevention, we want to talk about risk and protective factors. And risk factors would be, if you were abused, if you had these problems in your home that you saw every day, if your parents, had some of these problems, or the people that you live with, or the people in your neighborhood, not going to school every day, not having things to eat, not having, a safe place to live, and all of these things. So your protective factors, one of the most important ones is your identity and your culture and, who you feel like you are as a person.
Okay.
So learning about your culture and your history and your traditions is extremely important.
Okay. Where did they origin from? Like traditions? Do you like our ancestors, our elders?
We have, there's several different aspects of that. So we have, Creek traditions that may have came from before removal, and we have some ceremonies. We have the ceremonial grounds and those beliefs, and then some people, their traditions may be more rooted in church or spirituality, and that, that's even your family's traditions. Even if you have Christmas, or anything like that, that can help you feel more connected if you know what your family believes in or what's important to you. So if that's what that family came from, or some people who have lost their identity, going back to what we know our ancestors did before removal, and learning about it in our language too, that's very important.
Oh, yeah.
All of those things are part of our culture.
Do you think history is repeating itself?
It seems like it does sometimes. And if we don't learn from the past, then it will repeat itself. So all along the way, there's been, you know, bad things that happen, and then there's been some good things. And that's what, you know, we want to build on. But we have to talk about what happened in the past and recognize the impact it had so that we can, you know, make sure that we're using what we know to prevent things from happening again.
Yeah. Has trauma yet to be stopped?
There's always going to be traumatic events that happen. They affect people differently. You know, we can't get through life unscathed, and no one has a perfect life. Trauma also has a lot to do with how the person experiences it and how they perceive it. So if something bad happens to you and someone else at the same time, you might feel one way about it and they might feel totally different. It has to do with your protective factors. So if you have a strong connection with your family or your culture, and if you feel safe, and if you're healthy, and you have everything you need, and you have people that you can talk to about your situation, that your bad situation and your good situations that come up, if you have the support and the protective factors around you, then you will not be as negatively impacted by the trauma. So it not only helps us heal, to have protective factors heal from the past trauma, but it can help us deal with current or, you know, existing trauma that might come up. But we can prevent, hopefully, you know, the really huge, like historically traumatic events, like removal from the, you know, homelands. That was extreme, and, you know, we all hope and assume that nothing like that can ever happen again. But you know, sometimes we see things that could be leading up to or make us feel that way in the media or happening in other places, like the issue with the water on the reservation and things like that. So that makes us feel like maybe they aren't respecting our sovereignty as a tribe, or, you know, that's a tribal sovereignty, of course, is a whole other issue. But it really, you know, goes back to some of that stuff that happened in the past.
Yeah. If you could give the future generations some words of advice to cope with trauma in their lives, what would that be?
We just really need to, first of all, know what trauma is, and recognize that it does affect us. We cannot prevent every bad thing, like I said, from happening. That's impossible. But we need to prepare ourselves and our, you know, our kids, and make sure we have protective factors. And we need to heal from the past, and healing is really important. And we need to work together, and you know, respect our elders, respect our traditions. You know, work for the betterment of our tribe and our people. And it's really important to communicate and to talk about these things, and not be afraid to talk about them, not have secrets, get it all out in the open, and create more awareness. And the more we do that, then, you know, the more healing can take place.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you. Okay, so we're gonna get started here. It's recording right now, so can you discuss anything on the Indian removal, like just like how we did the first time?
Just what I heard.
Yeah. If you could discuss that, you know, anything like that.
For the young mothers.
Everything that you said last time, you know, kind of like do it all over again.
This is what I heard from another elder. And his folks come on that Trail of Tears. And he said he was told that the young mothers with young babies when they crossed that big river, they drowned them because they didn't want their babies to have to go through what they did. And he'd get emotional about it when he'd talk about it. But that's just one of the things, you know, happening on the Trail of Tears.
So where did they travel from? Like Alabama, like all those, and how many miles do you think? Like just in
state of Alabama, the Eufaula, you know, there's a Eufaula
in
from
Alabama.
there.
So you know how we never, like whenever an elder said something, you never second guessed it. You never try
No,
to.
we didn't. We just listened.
But did you hear about any other stories? You hear any other stories on it?
It's awful things that they take children. They call them horse riders, I guess. They take young children or babies and slam them against a tree or a post, just like they were an animal or something. And it was a harsh time.
Yeah. What are your opinions on it?
Well, they went through a hard time to be here, so we, as another generation, should make it better. Make it better for our people. That's what I think.
Yeah. Boarding schools, what were the purpose of them back then?
Well, the purpose my mother gave me was for me to learn to speak English and to read and write, so I know how to get along in the English world, I guess.
What occurred in these boarding schools? What occurred in these boarding schools?
Well, they'll just, to me, they just, I had long braids, and they just cut off the braid, then trimmed it with bangs. Then I looked like all the other 100 children that were there. We all wore bangs and short hair.
Do you think that was a kind of way to transform you into somebody that you weren't? Do you think that transferred you into somebody that you weren't, like by cutting your hair off? Like, was that?
Yes, because there was us with braids. We always wore braids. And it was the headgear that had short hair and curl, you know, permanent and all that.
Yeah.
But we didn't do that to our hair.
Yeah. What were the things that were taught in these schools where you went?
Well, where I went, it was more better than some of the other schools. We were taught to how we were going to live once we got educated, like taking care of your family, knowing how to cook and sew. They taught us them things in the school. And they also taught a lot of the girls. I went to a girls' school, learned how to play piano and different instruments.
Do you think it was more ways of putting you into a more white society instead of living your own way of life, like how you were taught?
seemed like we had to live that white society when we were at the dormitory. But when we left and went home, our folks still had the traditional ways.
Yeah.
So,
Could you speak your language at these schools?
no,
You couldn't.
that was forbidden to us. Said, do not speak your Creek. And they didn't say why or anything like that. They just said, do not speak it. So if you did speak it and it was reported on you, well, you'd get a paddling for it, but that's about it. But in other schools, it was worse than that. They got beatings.
I heard sometimes they would rinse their mouth with soap or make them eat soap or something. So, why were they trying to civilize?
I wouldn't know that. I don't know why they wanted to do that to us as a Indian tribe.
What are your opinions on it? Like, how does that make you feel being put into a boarding school away from your family and having to learn this new way of life? How'd that make you feel?
Well, in the long run, it did help me because I've made my life raising my family cooking. I've been a cook, that's all I knew.
Yeah.
To work as a cook. And in a way that helped me there. But see, you try to take things to help yourself. Because, you know, if you don't, what's the use doing it? But my mother always told me, you know, this and this and that, and I'll listen to her. And it's I think she raised me right.
Yeah. Reservations. What were the purpose of these reservations?
I don't know about that because I never live on a reservation.
But have you heard of them before? Like, were they poor condition, like living conditions and stuff like that? Or were they good conditions? Or were they just lands that, you know, Europeans didn't want, you know, like poor lands, you know? So was it anything like that? Have you heard of them?
Well, like in Hannah, the town of Hannah, they had what they call a reservation. And it had homes on there. And very few people lived in it. It wasn't for everybody.
Were they poor conditions?
No, they were called government homes.
Oh, okay.
And they were better than other homes, you know.
Substance abuse and like alcohol abuse, do you think that all occurs a lot in not just Native tribes but in a lot, but like, you know how you hear stereotypes all the time, like how Native Americans just drink all the time and all they do is just get drunk, or you know, like does it happen a lot?
Seemed like at one time there was always the drunk Indian. Seemed like we were labeled kind of like the drunk Indian. And, so if you didn't want to be that called that, you needed to go another route.
Yeah. How do you think that could have been prevented?
It can't even be prevented now.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. So our traditions, do you think our traditions help us on the road to recovery with all the trauma that's happened from the Indian removal and stuff? Do you think our traditions help us cope with it or have another way of speaking to our ancestors, or?
Not this time and age, because it's too far gone into this age time.
What about back then? What about back then?
It'd been better back then to get back into your traditions and stuff, 'cause your folks all carried it on. But now it's not. It's different from back then.
Yeah. What do the songs and prayers mean? What were they for?
The Creek Stone Dance songs, they were just chants, not words like we sing to in English. They were chants. And a lot of the men knew them different songs, and that's why they danced all night.
Yeah. What were the chants for? Like, what were they? What were they? Was it just did it vary reasons, or was it?
It depend on the one leading the dance.
Oh, okay.
And whatever he said, well, the other men followed.
Do you think history's repeating itself?
No.
No, you don't think so.
And some things, I mean.
Yeah, but has trauma yet to be stopped?
Yes.
If you could give the future generation some words of advice, what would that be?
I said not to waste. Don't waste your time on things that don't count. And don't waste your money, your time and things.
Yeah.
Use your time well. And it pays off best for you.
Yes, I understand.
That's all I can say.
Yeah, it's all good. Well, I appreciate you coming back out and helping me on this again.